Hi, so my name is Sarah Rose Bright, and I'm a sex, pleasure, and intimacy coach. And in today's video, I'm going to look at why pleasure is good for us. And I've subtitled this Pleasure as the Antidote to Stress. So, if you are somebody who finds it difficult to relax and switch off, who finds it difficult to enjoy pleasure in life, if you're quite stressed and exhausted a lot of the time, then this video really is for you. I see so many people who don't allow themselves pleasure for all sorts of different reasons. And this isn't just pleasure in the bedroom, this is pleasure in their whole lives. But this has an impact on their pleasure they're able to experience in the bedroom, because if you're not able to relax and switch off and enjoy pleasure in the whole of your life, it certainly isn't going to happen in the bedroom. And so that's why I very much, very deliberately call myself a pleasure coach, because so much of the work I'm doing is helping people to learn how to experience and enjoy pleasure in every aspect of their lives. So I'm going to look at a little bit about why pleasure is hard for a lot of people. And I'm also going to look at the world picture in terms of stress, because it's such a big issue at the moment. And then I'm going to look at why pleasure is good for us, because what I find is if we understand why pleasure is good for us, it helps us to give ourselves more permission to enjoy pleasure. So pleasure is not easy for many people, commonly, and I see this even more so amongst the women that I work with. Pleasure is seen as selfish, indulgent. If they allow themselves pleasure, it often comes with heaps of guilt. And another thing that people commonly say to me is, pleasure is not productive. There's no purpose to it. So why do it? And I hope to really challenge that in this video. And so also we have so many different cultural, historical, religious narratives that hard work is the most important thing. Pleasure, pleasure is bad. Pleasure is something that you do when you retire. And there's this sort of no pain, no gain, hard work sort of messages. It's sort of that Protestant work ethic is really drummed into us. It certainly was for me. And we get used to spending a lot of time doing things that actually aren't pleasurable. I mean, I know for me, I spent years doing work that I absolutely hated. And many of you who'll be watching this will be in a position where you are doing jobs and things that you don't like, and other things in life that you don't like. And some things, we have to accept. If we're, for example, might be that we're looking after an elderly relative, or there's phases in life which things aren't great. That's part of life. But when we're having to spend a lot of time doing things that we really don't like, we learn to sort of just get used to not having pleasure as well. And for me, and what happens is we develop what I call our pleasure capacity. So we allow ourselves either not to experience any pleasure, or we experience a little bit, but then we go, that's enough. So for example, it's a bit like broadband. If you think of bandwidth, and it's like our pleasure capacity may be here, but actually it's our beliefs, or it's past trauma, or it's learnt behaviors and conditioning that stops us moving to here. But with time and practice and exploration, we can start to undo some of this and allow ourselves to experience more pleasure and to enjoy pleasure more without the feelings of guilt and selfishness. And that's something I've certainly had to work at in my own life. And that's what I do with many of my clients. And, pleasure is natural for us. We're wired to seek pleasure rather than pain. And what I find is if we don't allow ourselves pleasure, if we don't prioritize pleasure as part of our well-being, then we get compulsive. So I love the phrase, I can't remember where I heard it, where it talks about that we then start to have counterfeit pleasure, which is getting pleasure from things that aren't true. So it might be from overeating. There may be temporary things like alcohol, or shopping too much. And we fill ourselves up with these sort of things. And for me, what it led to was a lot of addictive patterns. But it was rather than stopping the addictions, it was through allowing myself very genuine pleasures that helped me to unhook a lot of that. But it took time and practice, and it does for many of the people I work with. And pleasure is so good for us. I've seen this so much in my own life and my clients' life. And, and science is backing this up. And so what I want to talk a little bit now about is just that's giving you a bit of the big picture of why I'm talking about this. And in terms of stress, in the World Health Organization, recently called stress as the health epidemic of the 21st century. And I was looking at a recent report from mental health in the UK, and it shared that in 2018, 74% of people felt so stressed that they had felt overwhelmed or unable to cope. Now, that's 3/4 of the population experiencing that at least once. And that's 81% of women compared to 67% of men. So what happens when we're stressed? Because stress is a big issue in terms of the impact it has on how we feel as a sexual being and our sex life. So stress affects the hormones and the nervous systems especially. And if you see our stress response as like an accelerator that's released in the body, and it's designed to give us a shot of energy. For example, if we need to run away from something, the fight or flight response. And, for example, we might find our heart rate increases. We experience our palms getting sweaty. There's telltale signs that that's happening. And then we're sort of biologically designed that when the danger's past, that the brakes come on and the stress calms down. But what happens in our culture very commonly is that when we experience stress for a long period of time, or over a long period of time, even if it's low-level stress, it actually feels as like the accelerator's got stuck and we're in fight or flight pretty much all the time for some people. And our body is working overtime all the time, and we never allow the brakes to kick in. We're never able to switch off. We don't know how to switch off. And when we're in the stress response, our hormones are affected. We overproduce the stress hormone cortisol. And, cortisol is very, the more cortisol we produce, this really affects our ability to produce our sex hormones, particularly testosterone, which is a sex hormone with the greatest significance for men and women. So stress affects our hormones and our nervous system. So I just wanted to share that because it's good to understand that. And we can combat this through pleasure, because the more stress we have and the more cortisol we produce, the more that affects our sex hormones. But the more pleasure hormones we produce, the sex hormones that we produce, the harder it is to produce cortisol and for stress to kick in. So pleasure really is an antidote to stress. And so I want to share with you something called telomeres, because telomeres there's been some Nobel Prize work around telomeres, which are the protective protein caps at the end of our DNA strands. And what this shares is it's such an amazing thing, because the shorter the length of our telomeres, the more susceptible our cells are to dying, and the more susceptible we are to disease as we get older. And it speeds up the aging process, and it is accelerated by stress. And so there was a particular study that found that with women who had the highest levels of perceived stress in the study, had telomeres shorter on average by the equivalent of 1 decade of additional aging compared to the women who had perceived low stress. So this shows that this really has a massive impact. And it also showed that another piece of research was done that revealed that those who were regular and long-term meditators had a longer telomere length overall. And so, that shows that, and as we know, mindfulness meditation calms the nervous system, it decreases overthinking, it reduces stress. And I see this, with my clients as they start to adopt principles of mindfulness and in their sex lives, and just things like more relaxed bodies and breathing. It helps clients to increase their pleasure and their arousal state. So it has a real direct effect. And then there was a book in 2018 called The Telomere Effect. And what's amazing about this, it says to at least stop shortening our telomeres, but also to even have the potential to lengthen them, we need to improve our lifestyles by managing chronic stress, by exercising, eating well, getting enough sleep. And this, what's so amazing about this highlights that we actually have control over this, that tweaks in our lifestyle and our approach to stress and making these habits long term can really make a difference in how we age, our energy levels, our vitality. And so with this, it's partly around spending time truly relaxing, more than just switching off in front of the telly, but truly doing things that relax the nervous system and that support you to feel good, like creative pursuits, spending time having great sex, time out in nature, hobbies, playing music, whatever it is that really, being in the garden, whatever it is that really, really helps you to positively unwind, all have a positive impact on your health and your well-being and your aging. I mean, that's amazing. So it's not that pleasure doesn't achieve anything. Actually, pleasure helps us to kickstart the feel-good hormones and calms our nervous system. So it's actually vital, pleasure is, for our health and well-being. So when you say it doesn't achieve anything, you can actually now reframe this as that actually I need this for my health and well-being. And the Chinese say there's this phrase yin bu yang, which is where you've got the yin and the yang symbol, and the yang is the sort of outward acting active energy, and the yin is the more calmer being energy. So sort of the yin time is winter time, the yang time is summertime. But the Chinese say that in this tradition that to increase our yang qi, we need to nourish our yin qi. So it's not by doing more that we achieve more, because that's our sort of cultural norm, is that we just have more coffee, more sugar, more whatever, that keeps us propped up to keep going and going. But actually we're going in a very depleted way. Whereas if we take time off to rest, and we can actually get, slowing down to speed up, we can actually do more, because when we then get back to what we're doing, we come at it from much more calm and nourished and replenished place. And so, but taking time to rest and not overwork ourselves is something that is quite radical action in this day and age, but it's the most important thing we can do to give ourselves for our overall well-being. And, it's so many times I've heard people say that that's where they get their best inspirations, and they go back to their life or their families just from a very replenished place. And it's not always possible for people to do that all the time, but it can be sometimes micro moments that we just give ourselves permission to take half an hour away from the children, or go into work a bit later, or go to bed a bit earlier. There's all these little things that we can do that can add up and make a really significant difference. And so it's like our pleasure, enjoying pleasure is like exercising a new muscle for many people, that we need to learn to enjoy pleasure on a day-to-day basis to increase our pleasure capacity. And as we do this in our day-to-day life, this will actually have a benefit for our sex lives as well. And it's about learning to feel more pleasure, to enjoy more pleasure, because wherever you are, whether you're practicing doing yoga postures, practicing a musical instrument, practicing weightlifting, there's always extra that you can do. There's always another edge. And so it is with our pleasure. And I'm still exploring that today myself, so really just noticing where. So I'd invite you to notice what sort of shuts your pleasure off. Is it a voice that says you can't do this? Is it the sense of guilt, or a sense of selfishness or indulgence? What is it that limits your experience of pleasure? But also to have a contemplation of what is it that really brings you pleasure in your life. And, there may be the big things like, I want to do this traveling, or I want to set this business up, or I want to do these sort of bigger things. But also on a day-to-day basis, what brings you pleasure? So, it might be going for a walk in nature, or just sitting on a bench and enjoying the sunshine, or having a bath with beautiful bath oils, or having a bit of time reading a book that you're loving, or going to see a friend that you say, I can't catch up with because I'm too busy. What are the little things that you can do to bring more pleasure into your life on an everyday basis? Because it's absolutely an antidote to stress. And the more we practice the art of experiencing, enjoying pleasure, the more benefits that has, not just for our sort of sex lives, but also just for our overall sense of feeling good, and our overall sense of feeling vital and happy, and because the research on happiness shows that if, for example, you have big experiences in life, like go on a big holiday, or get married, or have children, or start get promoted, your happiness, after you've had this spike of happiness from this big experience, if it's a happy one, you'll then go back to the same level of happiness as before. So if you were miserable before, every chance you'll go back to being miserable again. And it's people that know how to sustain their happiness on a day-to-day basis, not based on the transient big events, that are the ones that stay happier day to day. And learning to enjoy pleasure and know what brings you pleasure in the little ways is part of that, So So it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So I hope, again, there's something in this for you and that you've enjoyed this. And if you have, I'd love it if you would share on social media. And also, please make any comments and reflections, and like the post, this video. And if you also have any questions about any of this, please let me know. Do sign up to my YouTube and Instagram channels, Sarah Rose Bright, and also at my website, sarahrosebright.com, where you can get my newsletter, where I send videos like this at least monthly. And if this is something that you'd like support with, if pleasure is an area of your life that you're slightly challenged by, or you'd like to learn how to have more pleasure in your life, do get in touch, because I offer one-to-one work around this, and it might be just in your general life or your sex life. And I promise you, it's the most incredible gift you'll give yourself that will never stop giving, because for many reasons, like I've shared, pleasure might be difficult for you in your life, but I promise you, like exercising a new muscle, it's absolutely something that's possible to shift. So thank you so much for listening this far, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.